Hello everybody, this is the open day talk for Chinese at Pembroke College, Oxford. I hope you're all in the right place, though you're welcome to stay even if you're not. Perhaps you might be inspired to study Chinese because Chinese is in fact one of those subjects you can do at university even if you haven't studied it at school. So I am Henrietta Harrison. I'm the Professor of Modern Chinese Studies for the university and a tutorial fellow in Chinese at Pembroke College. And I teach quite a wide range of more or less modern subjects. So I actually lecture on modern Chinese history. I teach an option on China's international relations. And I currently also teach classical Chinese text reading for third-year students. I'm a historian, but my interests are in the history of society. So topics like families, migration, religion, everyday life. One of the things I've spent quite a lot of time doing as a historian is interviewing old ladies in Chinese villages about their lives, which is fascinating, but always very difficult because they tend to speak with very strong accents. And now I am writing a book on the interpreters for the first British embassy to China in the 70s, 90s. But the other thing, of course, that I do is that I run Chinese here at Pembroke and look after the Pembroke students who do Chinese. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is first I'm going to explain the structure of the course because that's quite difficult, I know, to find out from our website. Then I'm going to talk about what we're looking for in admissions. And then I'm going to talk a bit about So starting with the structure of the course. So in the first year of the course, you will start, but there are basically three parts. There's modern Chinese, classical Chinese, and what we call the East Asia survey. So that's a huge survey of the history of East Asia right through from ancient times to the present. So modern Chinese, obviously most of you'll know what that is. That's the modern language, which we start from scratch. All the students go in together. I know that can seem like a strange thing if you did a fair amount of Chinese before, but as a matter of fact, it works well. The school courses vary a lot. Nearly everybody has things they need to strengthen, gaps they need to fill in. Our course is taught from a fairly rigorously grammatical point of view, and it'll produce very, very good Chinese speakers. But that means you have to really, really get a grasp on the language when you start. So then, in addition to that, our students all study and spend about a third of their time on classical Chinese. Now, you probably don't know what classical Chinese is, or at least some of you will do, but classical Chinese is the language in which Chinese was written up till about 1920. I mean, people sometimes still write things in classical Chinese today, but it was the standard way that Chinese was written up to 1920. And if you want to read anything written in Chinese before then, you need to know that. It's not the same as simplified characters, which many of you will have learned. There were simplified and full form characters. That's different. Classical Chinese has a somewhat different grammar, and you're taught it through studying not stuff that was written in 1915, but stuff that was written around in the 1st century BC, and that kind of period, and you learn how to read these texts. You may not think you would like this, but I have to promise you that almost every student starting our course really enjoys classical Chinese. The students who haven't done Chinese tend to enjoy it because on that class they're at the same level as everybody else, and the students who have done Chinese enjoy it because they're learning something entirely different. And then the next element, so the third element of the first year course, is called the East Asia Survey. And that's a whole set of lectures and tutorials on the history and literature and society of East Asia. So you'll have, in fact, there were 5 lectures a week, all at 8:45 in the morning to get you going early in term. First year Chinese is quite a heavy course for class attendance. This is not like doing one of those degrees where you don't have a lot of class time. And it's the East Asia Survey starts with archaeology and moves all the way on through to the 1989 Tiananmen Square movement, and indeed more. And I think there's a final lecture on law and society. So that's contemporary Chinese law and society. So it's a very thorough, and you'll have lectures, lots of lectures, and then tutorials. So you'll write an essay. There were 3 or 4 each term for that. So you will be kept pretty busy, and certainly if you haven't studied or you've only studied a little Chinese language, you'll be very busy indeed in the first year. Then for the second year, we have a second year abroad. All our students go together to Peking University. They take language classes, so that's fairly full-time language classes. And then in addition to that, there are a series of projects that you will do while you're out there, which work towards your finals in a quite informal way. So people can choose the choice of projects. There's one on a museum, assessing a museum in China, one on an ethnographic. So they culminate with an ethnographic project where you learn about a particular part of society in China today. You take part and you write it up. So that's the year abroad, and I'm sure you'll have some questions about that. And then you come back in the third and fourth year, and at that point, whereas in the first year you did the East Asia Survey, which is all of Chinese history, in the third year, we have a modern China course. So again, a whole series of lectures on all different aspects of modern China, both in a whole variety of disciplines: literature, history, anthropology, legal studies, all sorts of things. And that is accompanied by more tutorial essays, which go on through the third and fourth year. And then students also in the third and fourth year do modern and classical Chinese. So there's quite a lot of emphasis on writing Chinese and in learning to do interpreting in Chinese for modern. And for classical, that's actually the part of the course that I teach. We do Mingqing narrative prose, which means like 18th century ghost stories, which people enjoy, a legal case from the China trade with the British in the early 19th century, and then also the Shiji, so the records of the Grand Historian, a 2nd century AD text, and the Zhuangzi, an ancient philosophical text. So really quite a big range of classical Chinese texts as well. And then in addition, at that point, our course is extremely prescriptive. There isn't an enormous amount of space for choice in the course compared to if you were studying in a larger group at another university. But we have options in the third and fourth year, and you choose one option in your third year and one option in your fourth year. And those options, just to give some examples, there's an option on international relations, one on law and society, one on modern literature or film, one on classical philosophy. There's usually a pre-modern history one. There's usually one on pre-modern literature. And we have some occasional ones. People will come in and teach an option for us. This year we ran one on Islam in China. So all sorts of different options you can choose from. And those involve reading original Chinese documents and discussing them in class, and also writing essays. That's actually, I used to teach at the University of Leeds, and that's actually something that we can do here that really can't be done in other places very easily, because the level of Chinese you will have reached by the third year is really quite high, and the options are confined to students coming from the Chinese degree. So we can actually sit down with you. And so, for example, I'm teaching this year the international relations option, and we sit down and we read together, what do we read? Some of Xi Jinping's speeches, but also documents about Chinese who returned to China from Indonesia in the middle of the Cultural Revolution and how they were put on farms, and an autobiography by a Chinese guy who migrated to England in the 1890s, a real range of different materials. And we read those materials and we discuss them. And then the students write essays on China's relation with the world and how that has impacted its current international relations. So that's the options. And then the options culminate in what's called the extended essay. So that's a 5,000-word essay on a subject of your choice related to the option you've just done and very strongly guided. Or instead of doing the options in the extended essay, you can do another language, either Japanese or Korean usually, but also Tibetan or Sanskrit are also possible. And in that case, you do 2 language exams, you prepare for 2 language exams and another big general survey of that particular set of history. And these things, the options and the modern and classical Chinese continue in the 4th year, but in the 4th year, you also write a dissertation, which is a huge project on something of your own choice. Some recent current Pembroke ones. We had a great one on internet courts in Hangzhou. One of the students this year is writing on the dangers of friendship in 18th century China, where friendship was thought to be fraught with risks, which I hope you're not finding. Oh, and yes, we've got another one at the moment on blockchain in China. So you can see we've got a whole wide range of from blockchain, which is obviously absolutely contemporary and quite business focused, back to the dangers of friendship in the 18th century. A wide range of topics you can do for your dissertation. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you a bit about admissions. So what we are looking for is students who are interested in both learning the Chinese language and China, and who also have an interest in China that goes beyond China today and includes China's traditional culture and history and ancient philosophy and so on. Because basically what we're looking for is people who will enjoy our course and want to work hard at it. It is a pretty intensive course, so hard work is quite a large part of the game. So the first thing we're looking for is people who are committed to studying in Chinese. Now, I'm sure, because it's often the case at the open days, that lots of you will have shown you're committed to studying Chinese by studying it formally at school. You might have done GCSE, or you might be doing that now. You might be doing IB, you might be doing A-level, or you might be studying it informally. We've had people who studied online or through Saturday schools run by the Chinese community. We had a very nice guy a few years ago who'd studied in a Saturday school, and he was a big teenage guy and in with a lot of 5-year-old Chinese kids. And the result was very good Chinese pronunciation. But in any case, so you can prove your commitment by studying it formally, but we also do take students with no prior knowledge of Chinese. And if you're planning to apply for the course with no prior knowledge of Chinese, you have to understand that we will need evidence of linguistic ability somewhere. And an obvious way to show linguistic ability is to take another language at A-level. And we definitely would be looking for that kind of evidence. And indeed that you would be able to do well in another language. It's not a good idea to apply for Chinese if you've only ever studied one language before and you did badly in it at GCSE. You're likely to find Chinese difficult too, even if that was because, I mean, it's difficult for us to know. In fact, it's impossible for us to know whether you did badly in your German GCSE because you didn't have a good teacher, or you weren't really interested in that moment, or because you are not good at languages. But unfortunately, we're going to have to assume the latter. So we definitely want evidence of language learning. And if you haven't studied Chinese before, it would be a really good idea to make some attempt to look at the Chinese language. There's lots of free online courses, and just to have a little look. Are you going to like learning it? It's really important that you enjoy learning Chinese. It's not for everybody as an activity. So, some people just don't take to it. If you don't take to it, you're not going to have a fun time on the degree. So have a go at it. Have a little look at some resources. Check that you would like to do it. We're also looking at evidence of ability to work hard at something that might not always be inherently interesting. Now, of course, China is totally fascinating. It's really enjoyable. Honestly, I spent my life studying it, and you can't think of anything more interesting. But in order to study China, you are going to have to learn Chinese. And Chinese is a foreign language, and it's unrelated to English. So that means that you're going to have to learn all the vocabulary. And so in the first year, you can expect to spend 2 to 3 hours a day memorizing Chinese characters. That's a lot of memorization. School these days doesn't involve much memorization. You need not only to be able to memorize, but to memorize fast. So, you know, evidence that you're good at memorization would be something we'd be interested in knowing. But memorization is also just about hard work. So another thing we look at is commitment to things that show that you're determined and persistent and willing to practice rigorously. And you might do that by swimming or music or just anything that, I mean, a whole range of things you might do which show that you've plugged away at doing something which wasn't maybe fun all the time, but where you got a huge sense of satisfaction from achieving it. So that's Chinese language. And then, because we do have people who want to study Chinese, and it turns out they're only interested in learning Chinese language. That's actually not enough for this degree, because the whole point of studying Chinese is as a tool to learn about China. We're not studying Chinese language just for its own sake. And as a matter of fact, you may have noticed we don't have options in linguistics. So it's not a great course to do if your interests are totally linguistic. What we're looking for is someone who learns Chinese for the purpose of knowing more about China and including pre-modern China. So you might show that by the reading you've done. Newspapers, the Analects of Confucius, films, traditional novels, whatever it is, really showing that you are interested and engaged in China. And I know you've got loads of other schoolwork always to do, but nevertheless, we would like some kind of enthusiasm for Chinese. And in fact, there's a reading list which is available on our website, and we will circulate to you. It's a huge long reading list. It's not, the idea is not that you would read everything on the reading list, and only one applicant we ever had done that, and that was an amazing applicant and got in. But the point of it is not to do that. The point of it is for you to be able to choose what's interesting and what you can conveniently find, and read something that you would enjoy. But just to get into, to give you some suggestions of what might be interesting things to read, because that can be quite hard to make your mind up about. And otherwise, everybody's always read the same 3 books, though those change a bit over time. Okay, there's one further point which I know we always get asked questions about, so I'm going to cover here, which is the question of native speakers. So that's people who were born and brought up and educated speaking Chinese. So all our students are taught Chinese together in one class with people. So modern Chinese language, it's a compulsory element of the course. It's taught in one class with people who are starting from scratch. And it's about 1/3 of the course. And if you include classical Chinese, that's more than half the course. And that obviously isn't suitable for a native speaker. How could you, if you already speak Chinese, you can't possibly want to do a degree where you spend 1/3 of your time learning to speak Chinese. You need another degree. And we certainly hope that no one who applies to Oxford is the kind of person who would want to do a course because it was easy for them, which it would be obviously if you were studying something you already knew. So if you have been educated in China, which is the kind of person that normally asks me this question, then what we encourage you to do is to study a discipline, to study history, philosophy, literature, social sciences, politics, whatever it is you're interested in for your undergraduate degree, and then apply to us for graduate study. We have lots of students from China doing graduate study in the department, and we would enormously welcome applications from you at that point. Now, of course, there are students who fall between the 2 groups of people who've studied GCSE at school, which is probably our average intake person, Chinese level, and people who are native speakers and who did all their schooling in China. So, for example, you left China when you were 10, or you're a Korean who studied Chinese to a very high level in school, obviously, since Koreans their language is related in the written forms that you're going to get to a higher level. So if you're that kind of person who isn't quite a native speaker and isn't quite not, then the thing for you to do is to get in touch with us. You can email me, you can email the faculty of Oriental Studies applications, and just ask, say, this is my language level, would I be a suitable applicant? And we may not be, and we might say, we encourage you to apply, or we might say, really, it's not a very good idea and you'd be better to do something else first. So that's admissions. And the final thing I want to talk about is colleges. Obviously, this is a talk for Pembroke, but actually I want to start by making a general statement about choosing your college. And that is that I strongly advise you to go to a college which has a tutorial fellow in Chinese. So in fact, we don't teach Chinese in college. So because Chinese is a small subject, we take about 16 students each year. We teach everybody together in the department, in the Chinese department. And so the teaching is run jointly. But nevertheless, it makes a huge difference to be at a college with a fellow in Chinese. There are and there were 5 of colleges which have fellows in Chinese. Obviously, I'm one of them. That's Pembroke. Wadham, Queen's, St Anne's, and Univ are the other colleges that have fellows in Chinese. Now, there are other people who will teach you. So, for example, some of the members of our faculty are at graduate colleges, but the college fellow is responsible for your learning and is also attending what we call the Teachers of Chinese meetings in the faculty. And that's the meetings where we discuss your progress, where I, for example, sit down 3 times a term to talk to my colleagues about who's doing well, who's doing badly, what's going on, has anyone got problems, has anyone not been seen. That kind of keeping an eye on you is done by the college fellow. And if you apply to a college, which you can apply to various other colleges which generally take students in Oriental Studies, and they do sometimes take people for Chinese. And indeed, it's good for us in some ways if people go to those colleges, because it increases the number of students who get in for Chinese, because those will be places that would otherwise go to someone who studied Arabic or Sanskrit or something else. But it does mean that if anything goes wrong for you, there's very little chance. You're less likely to be well looked after. That's not always the case, but there's a risk that no one will really know what's happening with you. So it's all fine if you're going to be absolutely brilliant, but it can be a problem. The other nice thing, obviously, about going to a college with a fellow in Chinese is that those are the colleges that have more students doing your subject, and that makes a difference in a small subject like Chinese. So given that there are these 5, then you've got to choose between these ones. And you can do it by the subject interest of your college tutor. You're going to see quite a lot of your college tutor. Obviously, I'm very keen to have people who are interested in Chinese history, but also in contemporary China, politics, social science, anthropology, these kinds of fields, because they're all things that I've been very interested in. And then my colleagues will have other interests, and you can look those up on the different college websites. And I'm also going to talk to you, obviously, the academic reasons for studying Chinese at Pembroke. We have a good group of students. We aim to take 3 students in each year, so that's a nice community to be part of. The college Pembroke has an expertise in Oriental Studies, and therefore has a really good college library collection for the subject. So that means that you'll have books available for your essays in the college library, which is really helpful. And also that there are a lot of other people around who do China, or who do Oriental Studies. So you may not have and you may not be spending all your class time with the undergraduate studying Arabic, but you will have some shared experiences like doing the year abroad, or combining, quite a lot of heavy language teaching with tutorials. We also in the college have lots of masters and doctoral students studying Chinese who you can meet and learn from, which is always good. And we also have a regular postdoctoral fellow in Chinese. So that's someone who's finished a PhD and is spending 3 years with us doing research of some sort. The current one works on ancient Chinese reading manuals, so how you learnt to read in the 1st century BC. However, he is about to leave us and we will be looking for someone else, and that could be from any period of Chinese history, but that person will also be working with you and helping you and looking after you. So that's also an asset. And I think we also have a really good office here in Pembroke for welfare. But I'm sure when you meet the students, they will also tell you why it's a good reason to come here. And I hope that you will choose to come here. Okay, and we'll have questions at a separate moment. Thank you all very much.